Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into the hidden, frankly almost dystopian reality of generative AI in the corporate world today. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how to actually lock down your enterprise using the Defense Shield guidelines from NSSC. That's the French National Cybersecurity Agency. Let's get right into it. So let's kick things off with a pretty staggering reality, one that should literally make any IT professional stop in their tracks. 99% of organizations are unknowingly exposing sensitive data right now, just by using everyday generative AI tools. Seriously, 99%. That is not a typo. What we're looking at is a massive, quiet hemorrhage of corporate secrets, and it's happening right under our noses. Here's the roadmap for today. We'll cover the hidden danger of AI, the weapons cyber attackers are using, the risks of shadow AI, how to build your ANSI defense shield, and finally, why the human element is the ultimate failsafe.
All right, Section 1, the hidden danger of AI, a revolution with critical risks.
Look, large language models are an absolute revolution, we all know that. But they introduce an entirely new attack surface. A single moment of negligence when interacting with an AI, it doesn't just result in a minor software bug anymore. We are talking about the catastrophic compromise of strategic company data and even entire infrastructure systems. Because if security is just an afterthought, the very tool you brought in to boost productivity can literally become the Trojan Horse that brings down your whole network. Moving on to Section 2, cyber attacker weapons. Let's look at how hackers actually exploit AI. So, cyber attackers have entirely evolved their arsenal. They aren't just trying to brute force through firewalls anymore. They're actually manipulating the AI's logic itself. And the number one threat right now is prompt injection. This is where an attacker basically hides a malicious command inside a prompt that looks completely innocent. It tricks the AI into bypassing its own safety guardrails. So instead of behaving normally, the AI becomes this confused accomplice, executing hidden commands like sending out an email or querying a secure database. To put that into perspective, imagine the absolute nightmare of your own customer-facing AI chatbot suddenly interrogating your private database and then happily emailing confidential client info directly to an attacker. Why? Just because someone asked it a cleverly phrased, deceptive question. That is prompt injection in action, and it is terrifying. Then we have data poisoning. Think of this as essentially corrupting the AI's supply chain. Attackers contaminate the model by sneaking malicious data in during its initial training phase, or maybe later through an open-source code library it relies on. The whole goal here is to give the AI built-in biases or hidden security flaws right from birth. That way, the attackers can exploit it super easily later on. But wait, it gets trickier. Even if you manage to secure all the inputs, you still face the problem of invisible leaks. First, you've got regurgitation. That's exactly what it sounds like. The AI accidentally spitting out exact sensitive pieces of data that it saw during its training. And second, there's model inversion. This is a highly sophisticated attack where hackers carefully analyze the AI's responses and literally use math to deduce your sensitive secrets from those answers. Wild, right? Okay, Section 3, shadow AI and leaks, the enemy within. You know, sometimes the biggest threat isn't some malicious hacker in a hoodie. It's actually your own team, operating completely in the shadows, shadow AI. It's an absolute headache for corporate security right now. It happens when well-meaning employees bypass IT to use popular, unimproved public AI tools just to get their work done faster. But here's the catch. Every single time an employee pastes a proprietary block of code or a sensitive client spreadsheet into a public AI tool, they are effectively bypassing your multi-million-dollar firewall entirely. To combat this exact scenario, NC has Rule R34, and it lays down a really strict mandate. You must absolutely never, under any circumstances, use public AI tools to process sensitive or confidential professional data. The risk of the AI provider storing, collecting, and then reusing your data to train their future models is just way too high. Instead, you've got to rely on strictly controlled enterprise solutions, whether that's hosted locally right on your servers or secured via a cloud contract that comes with ironclad confidentiality guarantees. Which brings us to Section 4, the ANSI Defense Shield, security by design. So the foundational philosophy here is security by design. It's about integrating security at every single phase, not just slapping a Band-Aid on at the very end. This defense starts with your data. Rule R7 states you have to map and evaluate the sensitivity of exactly what data you're feeding into the machine. Then Rule R18 steps in, you must restrict that AI training data. The model should only learn from data that its end users already have legitimate access to. You cannot let the AI become a backdoor to forbidden files. And finally, Rule R19 requires you to guarantee the integrity of your training data, just so you know for sure it hasn't been poisoned. All right, so once the data itself is safe, you have to secure the AI's perimeter. Rule R25 is absolutely vital here. You must systematically filter every single input prompt for manipulation, and at the same time, filter every output response to prevent data leaks. You also really need to limit the AI's verbosity. Basically, don't let it talk more than it strictly needs to. And then there's Rule R26, which dictates that if your AI is talking to other systems through APIs or plugins, those connections have to be rigorously secured using DevSecOps best practices. And this brings up a deeply technical but honestly vital choice: the actual format of your AI models. ANC rules R5 and R6 strongly warn against using the pickle format. Why? Because it has a known, incredibly high security risk where it can execute arbitrary malicious code just by someone opening the file. No thank you. Instead, the preferred standard is safe tensors. It's specifically designed to prevent that kind of code execution and lock down your model weight safely. Finally, let's hit Section 5, the human failsafe. The failsafe in the loop. Because despite all these high-tech grids, all the filters, the fancy formats, the most advanced cybersecurity system in the world still relies on one critical component: us. ANSI Rule R9 establishes what is basically an unbreakable law of AI governance. An AI must never be allowed to automatically execute sensitive actions. Whether that's altering a critical server config or validating a major financial transaction, the AI cannot act alone. There absolutely must be a human in the loop pulling that final lever for any high-impact decisions. This human failsafe is especially crucial right now given the massive explosion of AI-generated code. Look, developers love using these tools to write code faster, and that's great, but trust absolutely does not exclude control. Any code generated by an AI has got to be systematically scrutinized and validated by a competent human expert before it ever gets close to a sensitive production environment. And of course, you have to wrap all of this cutting-edge AI guidance in traditional security iron. Rule R10 reminds us to enforce the principle of least privilege, alongside highly secured, strong authentication for administrators. Rule R23 demands mandatory security audits before you launch anything, period. And Rule R29, that requires obsessive, complete logging. You always need to be able to track every digital footprint so you know exactly who did what and exactly when they did it. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to remember something. In the world of generative AI, the threats of today are definitely not going to be the threats of tomorrow. Continuous adaptation and vigilance are absolutely vital, which leaves us with a pretty chilling million-dollar question to ponder as AI keeps evolving at this breakneck speed. What new vulnerabilities are going to emerge with even more powerful models that are right around the corner? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me, and stay secure out there.